Hey guys, it's Samantha Jamerson. Welcome back to my channel. This video has been requested by a lot of you, and when I was researching this topic, I was looking for a lot of videos that talked about this. So this video is basically going to be my labor story, but we're mainly going to focus on the fact that I had a VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after cesarean. So as you guys know, I just had my second child. My first child, Matthew, he was breech. So basically what that means is the head is up and the butt is down. And when you're going into labor, they need the head to be down in order for you to attempt to have a vaginal delivery. So I knew at about 30 weeks with my son that I was not able to have a vaginal delivery unless he flipped or unless I did some type of intervention to try to flip him, which I go into all of that detail of my last pregnancy and labor in my C-section story video, which I will post in the description below. In order to qualify for a VBAC, you have to have pregnancies or births that are past 18 months apart. So my son and my daughter are 24 months apart, but if you're under 18 months, whenever you delivered your first child to delivering your second child, if it's under 18 months, you cannot have a VBAC because you have a greater risk of a uterine rupture. It's still a risk if it's over 18 months, but it's a very low percent. But for this pregnancy, my daughter, she wasn't as stubborn and she was head down. So I was able to try to have a vaginal delivery, and I did. It was very successful and it was a great experience. So I'm basically going to be talking to you guys about that kind of ups and downs of vaginal delivery versus a cesarean. Now I have had both. So if you are interested, please keep watching. So I guess I'll start off with when I went into labor. So for my son, I went into labor at 38 weeks, which is 2 weeks prior to your 40-week full term, if you will. So I always thought that she was gonna come early. I thought she was actually gonna come earlier than him, but she held out one additional week. She came at 39 weeks. So what had happened was I went to my 39-week appointment at my OB's office. They did an NST on me, and basically that's where they hook you up to a monitor and they're monitoring the baby, and you're also able to see if you're having contractions. So I knew I was having contractions probably at least a week or a week and a half prior to that, but it wasn't consistent. It would happen for a couple of hours and then it might not happen for a couple of days, and that's very common the last couple of weeks or even months as you're getting close to your delivery date. So we get to the appointment and my husband came with me because I remember I wanted them also to sweep my membranes, which is basically where they put fingers into your cervix and try to rupture the membranes, if you will, and kind of disturb that area to kind of induce your labor. So I knew that was going to happen at that appointment. So I wanted my husband there because if my water did break, I wanted to be able to go right to the hospital. So I get to my appointment, they hook me up to the monitor, and my OB comes in and she says, "You're contracting every 6 minutes. Like, this is going to happen soon." And they say you should go to the hospital when you're every 5 minutes. So my contractions were never excruciating. Like they always say, you won't even be able to breathe or talk. That's how painful your contractions will be, and that's when you should go to the hospital. So they weren't that bad, and because with my son, my water just broke, I never even had contractions with him, I really didn't know what true contractions felt like. So I said to her, I was like, should I go to the hospital? And they were like, well, they might send you home because you're not every 5 minutes. Maybe, go get something to eat, go do some errands, and then see how you feel. So by the time we left the appointment, got food, and went home, the contractions started to pick up. Again, not excruciating, but I could definitely feel like something was going on and it was becoming consistent every 5 minutes. And since I was going to attempt to have a vaginal delivery, just because the baby's head is down doesn't mean that you're going to be able to have a vaginal delivery. There could be something off with my anatomy. The baby could not descend. So I didn't want to get my hopes up that I was going to have a vaginal delivery. I was still preparing for a C-section. So since I was potentially going to have one, I wanted to make sure I got to the hospital in time to have an epidural. So when they got to every 5 minutes, I said to my husband, I was like, I'm going to call. I call, they say, head to the hospital, your contractions are every 5 minutes, you should head over. So we get to the hospital and they check me out, and it was a nurse practitioner that came in and she asked what was going on, and I said, my contractions are every 5 minutes. I think I was just under 2 centimeters dilated at that point. but my contractions every 5 minutes, so they told me to come to the hospital. She checks me out. She goes, just because you're every 5 minutes, you're still not dilated enough where we would like you to be, and you really should be. She basically kind of told me, like, you should be not being able to talk, breathe, like you should be in a lot of pain in order for us to admit you, and they are very short staffed and didn't have that many beds. So I begged. I was like, please, please, please. I dilated very quickly with Matthew. By the time I got to the hospital with Matthew, my son, for my first pregnancy, I was already 6 centimeters dilated. So I was afraid if they sent me home that I was going to have my water break overnight. And of course, that was the night. It was a Thursday night, January 6th. We were getting a lot of snow Friday morning on the 7th. So I just said to her, I said, please, my contractions are getting more consistent. They're getting closer together. We live, a half hour from the hospital. There's going to be a lot of snow tomorrow. Is there any way that you can admit me? She felt, a little bad for me, which I appreciated. And she called my OB. My OB came down and saw me, and they decided to admit me. So I probably got to the hospital at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I was in my room with the epidural by like 10:30. The epidural was not painful at all. It was this tiniest little pinch. I was shocked at how much it did not hurt. I got a spinal block. You'll get a spinal block when you have a C-section, and I remember that being definitely more painful, but that was also my first experience with that, so I had no idea what to expect. So it kind of shocked me a little bit, where with the epidural, I was prepared for there to be pain because I had the needle in my back before with the spinal block. So the epidural was not bad at all, kicked in right away. Got the epidural, like I said, 10:30-ish. They checked me again to see if I was dilated. I was like 3-4 centimeters dilated by that point. And then my OB's like, okay, we're just gonna, let you relax. She did come in and break my water. Breaking your water does not hurt as long as you have the epidural. You just feel like the warmth of your water breaking. That's all you feel. And then she's like, I'm gonna let you get some sleep. We'll check back in a couple of hours. Meanwhile, I'm not sleeping, right? I mean, it's basically my first time potentially having a vaginal delivery. I was so nervous and scared and excited. So I think my husband laid down on the couch. He may have slept for a little bit. But I remember probably about an hour after getting the epidural, if I was laying on one particular side, like if I was favoring my left or favoring my right, the epidural kind of goes to that side of your body and doesn't necessarily control the other side as much. So I remember I would lay to one side and then I would feel the contraction on my left, and I was like, that's weird. If I rolled on my left, I would feel the contractions more on my right. So probably around 1-ish, I wasn't in pain, but I was like, I'm starting to feel these contractions, and shouldn't I not be feeling them with the epidural? So I told the nurse says you might just need a top off. And I was like, oh, okay, what's that? They basically can come back and add more into your epidural. You don't get stuck again with the needle. They just add it through the medicine, because when you get an epidural, there's actually like a tubing that's like kind of stays out of your back that connects into the spine, that you can add more medicine if need be. So the anesthesiologist came back in, they added more, and my legs were like jello. Like, you can, I don't know how to explain this. I knew like my legs were there, if that makes sense. And when I was going to push and they were holding my legs, I could feel them holding my legs, but your legs just feel heavy. Like, I couldn't pick up my legs if I tried. Rolling over, I had to like use my arms and my abdomen to kind of roll over, but your legs are kind of just like, I don't even know. They're there, but it's really hard for you to pick them up because they're very heavy. So the nurse comes back in around, 1:30. And I said, I'm starting to get uncomfortable again. I'm starting to feel these contractions. And she said, okay, well, maybe your cervix has progressed more, and that's why you're starting to feel it. Because once you get 9-10 centimeters, even with an epidural, you're going to feel that pressure. So she checks me again, and she's like, honey, you're 10 centimeters. It's time to start pushing. And I remember getting so excited, but so nervous, because my sister, the baby was head down. She pushed for, 4 or 5 hours, but the baby could not get past her pubic bone. So she had to have a C-section, unfortunately. So I was still trying to not get my hopes up, because I was afraid, honestly, that if I pushed and I wasn't able to have a successful vaginal delivery, that I was gonna feel like a failure. And that's so silly, because at the end of the day, you get a baby. So whether you have a vaginal delivery or a C-section, you are still a hero, you were still a warrior, you were still that baby's mother. So I was trying not to get my hopes up, just because that's how I am, and I knew I would have been really hard on myself if I couldn't have a vaginal delivery. Now, time to start pushing. Let me go get the doctor. My doctor comes in, and this is where I truly felt like the experience was so much better than the C-section. So when you have a C-section, you are, whether it's a planned C-section or your water breaks. Mine, I had a planned C-section, but my water ended up breaking 2 weeks early, so it was kind of a sporadic thing. Get to the hospital, you get admitted, you get your spinal block, they kind of roll you into the OR. There's maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 nurses, doctors, techs. Your husband's not in with you in the very beginning when you have your C-section. They bring you in first, they give you the spinal block, they lay you down, they have your husband get all dressed to come in so he can be sterile, and then he sits with you and you're kind of lying there and you have the curtain in front of you. For me, it wasn't that big of a deal because I'm medical. Being in a medical setting like that didn't bother me, but it is just kind of like, la, la, la. You're just lying there looking up at the ceiling, talking to your husband while they're kind of working around you, taking care of the baby, and doing your procedure. When the doctor came in for my vaginal delivery, I guess because a lot of women push and push for hours, she didn't even gown up. She literally came into the room, sat at the end of my bed. The nurse had my one leg, my husband had the other leg, and she's like, all right, let's start pushing. And we would push, and you push as hard as you can for 10 seconds, take a little breath, 10 seconds again, take a little breath, 10 seconds again. And we would push on contractions. So I was hooked up to the monitor. They would tell me when I was having a contraction, because I couldn't really feel it that much then, and I would push. And in between pushes, we would just kind of talk, and it was just so low key, and that's all that was in the room. And yes, pushing is hard because you're numb, but what someone told me, I think it was one of my patients who either had a baby or maybe she was a nurse, I don't remember. When you push, you want to push in towards your belly button. So if you can imagine like kind of tucking your abdomen in towards your belly button and then pushing out. And someone told me that, and that really, really helped because I only pushed for about 45 minutes and I had my baby. But that setting was just so intimate, and we would just like talk in between pushes, and I don't know, the experience was just so much more intimate than the C-section. So anyway, I'm pushing, the head's coming out. I can hear my husband say, oh my God, babe, like I see the head. And you get like really encouraged and you're like, I could do this. You keep pushing and pushing. And there was a time where like her head was out, but her shoulders weren't. And my husband's like, oh my God, like it's crazy that she could breathe like that. And it's because they're still attached to the umbilical cord. And then she's like, all right, you could take a break. But when the baby gets decently far out, you're like, no, there's no break. This baby needs to come out because you're feeling a lot of pressure at this point. So they actually asked, then at this point the doctor goes and gowns up, right? Because she knows the baby's coming. And they asked my husband if he wanted to help deliver the baby. And he was like, no, I'm gonna just stay here, hold her leg, thanks. And I remember cracking up because I was like, Mike, deliver the baby. He's like, no, I'm good, I'm just gonna hold your leg. So I said to her, I said, when the baby starts to come out, can I pull her out? I don't know if you guys, if any of you watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians, but Kourtney Kardashian did that. And for some reason, when I saw her do that, I was like, I want to do that. I don't know why. I think I was like high off the epidural. I don't know. So I'm pushing. And the nurse says, honey, open your eyes. Your baby's here. And I look and reach down and pull her up and put her right on my chest. And it was awesome. Like, I know that sounds so crazy, and people are probably like, oh my God, that's so disgusting, but it was the most beautiful thing ever. Having that delivery meant everything to me. It just made me feel like I did it. I pushed this baby out, because I never got the chance to even try with Matthew because he was breech. So I just wanted to know if I could do it. So for me, in terms of a vaginal delivery versus a cesarean, both are fine. Both, you can do it no matter what life has in store for you. If you have to have a C-section, I did too. It is not the worst thing in the world. The only thing that I didn't like about a C-section was there's really no intimate moment because you're in the OR. And yes, they bring the baby to you, but the baby's like on you for like a second and they take the baby away. I held my daughter for, I don't even know, maybe like a good 20-25 minutes where they even took her away from me to clean her up. So that I loved. And then the recovery. So with my C-section, I remember a week after my C-section, I drove myself to my nail appointment. So I remember not being down for too long. But the first 3 to 4 days after a C-section are tough because they cut through your skin, they cut through your abdominal wall. You are having major surgery, so you do need to rest. So a lot of times when the baby was crying, or if the baby needed feeding and I was breastfeeding my son, my husband would have to get up, change his diaper, bring him to me. And I kind of felt like a bum not being able to like get up and do things, because I'm someone who does not stop all day long, constantly cleaning, organizing, doing something. So the recovery was, of course, a little bit more difficult with the C-section versus a vaginal delivery. However, I know people who have vaginal deliveries who like tear completely, have a lot of stitches. Like it can be a tough recovery. For me, I only had like a couple stitches, not bad at all. I remember sitting was a little bit difficult. I had to like lean on one butt cheek a little bit. But a vaginal delivery recovery was so much easier than a C-section. Now, that came in handy this time because if you guys follow me on Instagram, the day we came home from the hospital, my husband tested positive for COVID. So we walked in the front door and he went right up to the back bedroom to quarantine. So I was basically taking care of a newborn all by myself. And if I was recovering from a C-section, I don't even know what I would have done. That would have been something that I don't even know. So long story short, that is my labor story, and it was great. Both experiences I'll never forget. At the end of the day, I got a baby out of both of them. But for me, of course, a vaginal delivery was way more intimate and easier recovery. But if I had to have a C-section again, I would just say prepare for more of a medical setting. Obviously, you're in the OR. It's only going to be your partner that's allowed to be there. And it's going to be a little bit more of a longer recovery. But besides that, both of them you can do. So I hope you liked this video, and I hope that you kind of learned a couple tips about C-section versus a vaginal delivery. If I could slow down